As always, this podcast is AI free.
The Klingon Empire is dying, and I think it deserves to die. Don't get me wrong. I'm very touched that you still consider me to be a member of the House of Martok. But I tend to look at the Empire with a little more skepticism than Curzon or Jadzia did. I see a society that is in deep denial about itself. We're talking about a warrior culture that prides itself on maintaining centuries-old traditions of honor and integrity. But in reality, it's willing to accept corruption at the highest levels.
You are overstating your case.
Am I? Who was the last leader of the High Council that you respected? Has there even been one? And how many times have you had to cover up the crimes of Klingon leaders because you were told that it was for the good of the Empire? I know this sounds harsh, but the truth is, you have been willing to accept a government that you know is corrupt. Gowron is just the latest example. Worf, you are the most honorable and decent man that I've ever met. And if you are willing to tolerate men like Gowron, then what hope is there for the Empire?
Let's fucking go. The road is about to end. Let's fucking go.
Hey, poor! Hey, poor! Hey, poor! You don't have to be poor anymore! Jesus is here!
The loudspeaker spoke up and said, Christianity is stupid.
Powered by Adrenochrome.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude, located not far from the Redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts and Lord Nibbler are in my room. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by Guyanese cats. Get over it. This is a news show episode where I cover stories in the news that are related to things like atheism, secularism, science, or I find just plain interesting. Next episode will be a chapter or two from the Gospel of Thomas. I don't really know if there's chapter breaks in that or not, but it'll be an hour's worth of content, I can promise you that. Apologies for not putting out an episode in so long, but I have been going through some things, and with my being off work, it has been really hard for me to keep track of time, let alone remember what day it is. I tried shifting my sleep schedule around to one that's more normal, and I'd managed to do it for a day or two, but not enough to make a real difference in things that I needed to do around here. Some days I'd drag my carcass out of bed in the early afternoon and spend my time outside working on the bike. I think I mentioned in the previous episode that I'd broken the bracket that holds the derailleur on, and I've been trying to find a replacement for it ever since. Amazon has a number of them for sale that look like they're the correct one, but when the part arrives, it's completely wrong. I need one that faces left, they send me one that faces right. And this is despite the fact that the photo on the website shows a left-facing one. In digging around, it turns out that the design used by my bike is fairly unique, so it's going to be difficult to find the right part, it seems. However, given that the bracket's aluminum, I should be able to fabricate something that might work fairly easy. I'd rather not, but if the one place that specializes in such things can't find me a replacement, that's what I'm going to have to do. I can still ride the bike, I just can't pedal it, so everything's got to be done by the motor. I also had to do other minor work on the bike as well as get my old bike working, as there was a problem with the brakes. I haven't fully solved that, but at least I don't have to stop it with my feet anymore. Depending on my work schedule and the weather, I might be able to get both bikes back up and running like they're supposed to in a couple of weeks. Which reminds me, for complicated reasons, I'm going to have to work overtime whenever my job offers it for the foreseeable future. So I don't know how routinely I'm going to be able to push out episodes. I'm going to try to be more regular with them, but I can't promise anything. Now, before I get into the news bits that I want to cover, there is the whole mess of what's going on in Venezuela, of which we really don't know all the information that we should, thanks to the mainstream media being in Trump's pocket. Nor does it look like the Trump administration is going to be discouraged from doing something like that again by the international community, since nobody's really had the balls to condemn the actions, let alone slap sanctions on the U.S. or members of the Trump administration. I know that there are Americans who are condemning what happened, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of popular support for what Trump did in many parts of the U.S., and here comes the but. I am old enough that I was of draft age when the U.S. invaded Iraq the first time, back in 1991. One thing that I can remember quite clearly were all my co-workers, many of whom didn't have to worry about being drafted, being appalled at the idea of the U.S. invading Iraq while we were building up our forces in the Persian Gulf. For the most part, these were people who didn't like H.W. Bush since he'd been elected. They made all kinds of arguments about how us invading Iraq was morally wrong, and that if we hadn't been messing around in that part of the world for decades, then Iraq might never have invaded Kuwait to begin with. They had plenty of derisive things to say about the whole mess until shortly after the bombing started. Then, when it became clear that the Iraqi military was going to fold as soon as it encountered U.S. forces, yeah, I know, other countries were there, but unlike in World War II, the U.S. did the bulk of the operations. Those co-workers who'd previously condemned the whole thing were celebrating what was going on. And yes, I do mean celebrating. They were talking about this or that thing being blown up and laughing. They were wearing Bart Simpson t-shirts that said things like, "Hey Saddam, eat my shorts," or had Bart flipping Iraq the bird. I can remember Friend and I standing there in one of the aisles at work looking at a group of co-workers admiring the Bart Simpson t-shirt one of them had just bought. My friend and I both just shook our heads in disbelief. At that moment, we realized that all the objections to the war that they had weren't based on moral grounds. They were based on the fear that, like Vietnam, we might lose the war. Once that fear evaporated, then so did their opposition to the war. Why do I bring this up? Because I don't think that this is going to be what brings down Trump, even though it absolutely should. This was a violation of both international law and the U.S. Constitution, pure and simple. International law is quite clear that this kind of action is illegal, and the U.S. Constitution requires the President to get the approval of Congress before undertaking such actions. While Democrats in Congress have voiced their objections to this invasion, you'll notice that not too many of them have called for Trump's impeachment, which is what should happen. He and everyone in his administration who was involved in this should be impeached and removed from office. The military personnel involved should be charged with following illegal orders as well. Now, members of Congress are promising to hold hearings, and while I'm sure that it's possible that as a result of those hearings people will call for Trump's impeachment, I think that this is unlikely. Because so long as the government can keep any bad news about Venezuela off the front pages, as it were, then people are going to forget about it. You might remember, but probably don't. In 2004, U.S. forces yanked Haitian President Jean Bertrand Aristide from his country in the wake of a coup. Control of the country was turned over to UN forces, and everybody in the U.S. promptly forgot about it. In case you didn't know, Haiti wasn't exactly a peaceful place after this, and right now there's a civil war going on in the country. Aristide, I want to add, claims that the uprisings in his country were caused by the French and U.S. governments, who were upset at his demands that France pay reparations for the years that Haiti was a slave colony, and for the reparations that Haiti had to pay after it won independence. Those reparations weren't paid off until 1947, 122 years after Haiti gained its freedom. That money was to compensate the slave owners for the loss of their slaves. Now, I can't say for certain that the U.S. and France toppled his government out of fear that France might have to pay reparations, but it wouldn't surprise me. After all, we do have a history of doing such things. Why I bring this up is how many of you remembered that we did this. It certainly wasn't talked about a lot a couple of months after it happened, and if Haiti is brought up today, it's simply an afterthought. And I need to point out that we had troops on the ground in Haiti for months after we pulled Aristide out. You might remember that when Trump was talking about making Canada the 51st state, I said that I didn't think we'd invade Canada before we invaded anyone else. We'd go for a country filled with brown people, like Mexico, because the rest of the world would just respond to that with embarrassed throat clearing, which is precisely what has happened. Trump and Rubio are both talking about Cuba and Mexico as the next place for U.S. to invade. In addition to the problems caused by the U.S. embargo on Cuba, the Cubans have been having food shortages in recent years. If there's mass starvation in Cuba, then we're not invading to topple their government, so much as we are to undertake a humanitarian operation to stop the mass starvation, is what they can say. Cuba's a small country, and if you're hungry enough, you're not going to care who invades you, so long as they bring food with them. And for centuries, Cuba was used as a staging area for the Spanish and French military forces in their efforts to keep control of Latin America. I also want to point out that Cuba gets most of their oil and gas from Venezuela. We cut off their fuel supply, and it's a lot harder for them to fight off an invasion. The burning question is, what do us average folks do about this, since it seems unlikely that the courts or Congress are going to hold Trump and his minions accountable? Well, for starters, those of us in the U.S. need to put pressure on our elected representatives. Folks outside of the U.S. need to pressure their governments to put sanctions on the U.S. And I'm going to suggest for folks like me, who live in a red state, that we use the same argument to object to this that Marjorie Taylor Greene is using. Companies are going to export American jobs to Venezuela. I don't know if that will be enough to get Congress to move against Trump, but it's an argument that might win against the folks who really don't care what America does, so long as America is seen as winning. There's a lot more that I'd like to say about this, but I can't, because that could lead to imperial entanglements, as Obi-Wan might say. I will tell you this, though. One of the things that I learned when working on cars was, if I ever had a moment where I was in the middle of doing what should have been an easy job, and I looked at something and said, don't tell me I'm going to have to do insert really complicated thing that probably involved me removing a bunch of other things to get at what I was needing to work on, that instead of wasting time trying to avoid doing that thing, I needed to just go ahead and do that thing. Not once did it turn out that I could avoid doing whatever it was that I didn't want to do. We're at that point when it comes to dealing with the Trump administration. What that really complicated thing you have to do that you don't want to, I don't know. but you should probably get started. I will remind you of what Winston Churchill supposedly said. Americans can be trusted to do the right thing once all other possibilities have been exhausted. One final thing before we get to the news is that during her 2019 testimony, as part of the first Trump impeachment, former National Security Council member Fiona Hill testified that the Russians hinted that they'd like to make a deal with Trump over Venezuela. The U.S. stops supporting Ukraine, and Russia will stop supporting Venezuela. This should be very concerning, especially if you're Ukrainian, in the wake of our invasion of Venezuela. Okay, let's get to the news.
We have found the witch, may we burn her?
This episode's victim is Nicolas Antonin, who lived from 1602 to 1632. He was a French Protestant pastor who attempted to convert to Judaism. The French community refused to officially accept him as a Jew because they were afraid that if they did, persecutions would start. Joke's on them, folks don't need an excuse to start persecuting Jews. Anyway, he was born a Catholic, though he did have some Jewish ancestry, and it was while studying under Jesuits that he lost his belief in Catholicism. After encountering a Protestant minister, he converted to Protestantism and was an eager convert until he began his studies to become a pastor. Then, surprise, surprise, he decided that Judaism was the correct faith and secretly converted. He moved around in Europe trying to find a place where he could live openly as a Jew. Failing to find such a place, he moved to Geneva and tried to make a living as a Protestant minister, doing his best to shape his sermons so that he didn't have to mention Jesus. And eventually he slipped up, said the wrong thing in front of a lord, who then insisted that Antonin be prosecuted. Antonin fled, but went bug-fuck crazy. No joke. He was found living in the streets, mumbling almost incoherently about being Jewish, and the local authorities had him committed to an insane asylum. Do you realize how far gone you have to be in the 1600s for people to say you're mentally ill and not possessed by demons? Well, if you're a man. I mean, if you're a woman, all you have to do is just, assert yourself slightly, and then you're mentally ill. Since the medical treatment of the era could do nothing to help him, he was released, then put on trial for heresy. Surprisingly, he accorded himself well during his trial, so much so that the local Christian clergy begged the court to not issue a death sentence. But they did. On April 20th, 1632, he was convicted of the charge of heresy and was immediately taken out, tied to a post, strangled, and then burned. His execution was so controversial that it was the last public burning of a heretic in Geneva.
Because I don't understand the whole fundamentalist thing. You see, I'm an Episcopal, that's Catholic light. It's kind of like same religion, half the guilt. It's frightening. You know, Catholics have confession, Episcopals have Thanksgiving, your dad has a couple of gin and tonics. I never loved your mother, you know that, don't you? No, I didn't, Dad, and she's right there. Tell her again. Because you have to realize, Episcopal is basically Church of England, which was Henry VIII breaking away from the Catholic Church going, I'm the fucking Pope now, ha ha ha. He broke away, and then people broke away from that church. They were Calvinists. They found him to be too loose. And then there were the people who broke away from the Calvinists. There were the Puritans, our ancestors. People so uptight, the English kicked them out. How fucking anal do you have to be for the English to go, get the fuck out? No, take your pimp shoes and go.
From Cincinnati.com, Ark Encounter visitors potentially exposed to measles in recent days. Health officials are warning residents of potential exposure to measles after an unvaccinated out-of-state traveler stayed in Kentucky at the Holiday Inn and Suites in Dry Ridge and visited the Ark Encounter in Williamstown, about 40 miles south of Cincinnati. The traveler, who had not received the measles vaccine, was in the area from December 28th to December 30th, according to a Facebook post from the Kentucky Department for Public Health. The unidentified traveler visited the Ark Encounter, a Christian theme park featuring a life-sized replica of Noah's Ark, on December 29th, according to the health department. Measles is a highly contagious respiratory virus that can lead to severe health complications, particularly in young children. It's tempting, very, very tempting to laugh at this. After all, Darwin is a hungry god. And it's not at all surprising that someone who thinks vaccines are a bad idea is the kind of person who'd go to Hambone's Ark. And I won't claim that I didn't chuckle at this news, but let's remember that there's a lot of kids out there who are unvaccinated because their parents won't let them. Measles is highly contagious, and whenever there are outbreaks of measles, there are people who die from the disease. Most of them are children. I want you to think about the fact that a parent who doesn't vaccinate their kid is probably not going to be the kind of parent who immediately rushes the child to the doctor when the kid comes down with a vaccine-preventable disease. They're probably going to use alternative medicine crap and only take the kid to the doctor when the kid is on death's door. No, that's not certain either. They might simply describe it as God's will and just not do anything at all.
You know, that really is a nice collection. Must have taken you a long time to hunt down all that history.
From RisingCashmere.com. Third ancient sculpture in a month emerges from River Jehulum. I guess that's how it's pronounced. An ancient stone sculpture was recovered on Monday from the River Jehulum at Larkapura in Awantipora area south of Kashmir's Pulwama district. Officials said the artifact is believed to be centuries old. A police spokesman said Awantipora police ensured the safe preservation of the sculpture immediately after its recovery. The artifact, believed to be centuries old, has been formally handed over to a team from the Directorate of Archives, Archaeology, and Museums, Jammu and Kashmir, for detailed documentation, examination, and conservation, he said. The spokesman said the sculpture, crafted from fine stone, reflects the region's rich cultural and historical heritage. Immediately after its discovery, Awantipora police secured the artifact and kept it under safe custody until the supervision of the SHO police station and Awantipora, ensuring its protection from damage or misuse, he's added. It's thought that the sculpture dates from the 1200s. You know those arrow signs that people twirl in front of stores? The sculpture resembles that and has a carving of a warrior on it and some other figures. It's kind of hard to make them out in the photo. Our archaeologists describe it as a memorial stele and believe that it depicts a warrior who died sometime before it was carved. Given how old it is and how long it was in the water, it's in remarkably good shape. Honestly, the image is on it. If one of the ancient alien jerks hears about that, sees that, they'll immediately be saying it's, proof of aliens visiting the Earth because of the way it looks.
Maybe it's a little early. Maybe the time is not quite yet. But those other worlds, promising untold opportunities, beckon. Silently, they orbit the sun, waiting.
From jalopnik.com. Now NASA is closing its biggest library, some of which could be lost forever. On Friday, NASA shuttered the doors of the Goddard Information and Collaboration Center, the 100,000 volume library of the storied Goddard Space Flight Center. These documents include records of moon missions, real and theoretical, American and Soviet. The history of these efforts, ideas, and failures are invaluable to any future moon mission. Like, say, this new space race we're trying to win. But with the shuttering of the Goddard building just one of the many closures at the site as NASA endures deep budget cuts, the future of this archive remains unclear. At least some will be saved and moved to other NASA libraries, but many may be lost forever. A cosmic shame. The New York Times reports that NASA has been shutting down libraries for years now. At the start of 2022, the space agency had 11. As of Friday, it's now down to just 3. This initiative is technically bipartisan in that sense, although does seem to have gotten more aggressive during the Trump administration. This is a consolidation, not a closure, NASA spokeswoman Bethany Stevens told the New York Times. The building closures at Goddard, also planned since 2022, will save tens of millions of dollars over time. However, the original plan was to build new facilities, and there's been no follow-up on that at all. This library has some of the only copies of important documents in the world, and there's no guarantee that those documents will be saved. If NASA doesn't keep them, they're supposed to be thrown into the trash. I'm not kidding. This is the burning of the Library of Alexandria all over again. In other articles about this, scientists talked about how they used the information in that library all the time, and that much of the material there wasn't online. Nor is it just the space program that's going to be impacted by the destruction of these items. There are any number of technologies out there that we use every day which can trace their origins to the space program. Not just digital cameras that were originally developed for the Hubble telescope, software that makes things like the internet possible, and all the stuff we do with computers. Many of the companies today that do such things were founded by people who worked at NASA or for one of NASA's contractors. And it's not just software either. Cordless tools, as well as lots of battery technology out there, owes its existence to the Apollo program. NASA didn't want to have to send astronauts to the moon with tools that required an extension cord, so they had to figure out how to make battery-powered tools. Battery technology is important to things like satellites, and it was NASA doing the research that led to the breakthroughs that gave us light portable batteries. We wouldn't have electric cars or other vehicles as powerful as they are if it wasn't for NASA. And I'm going to suggest that if you're in Maryland, which is where Goddard is, you go dumpster diving and try and save the stuff that they throw out. See if you can find a local library that will take it. If possible, coordinate with other folks in the area to pick the same library to donate the stuff to. You can pitch it to the library as being a big selling point when it comes to fundraising or attracting people to come to the library. If, like me, you're not anywhere near Maryland, then let folks know. I've spammed every book-related Facebook group I'm in with news articles about this and told people to do what they can to try and save the stuff. To get political for a moment, if you're someone who's opposed to the Trump administration but are worried that you might come to harm if you push back, this is a way to push back that has a low risk of you being prosecuted. I realize that America's not a terribly literate society anymore, but how stupid is this administration going to look if they try to prosecute you for wanting important books and other materials to be housed in a public library? You're saving government property that our taxes paid for. You're the one fighting government waste, not Trump.
T. Earl Grey hot.
From Jalopnik.com, this website wants your next car repair to cost just a few cents. 3dcarparts.org is simple. Users upload components and mark what year, make, and model that part is for. It's not quite perfect. Models don't seem to be cross-referenced for fit, so searching parts for a 1993 Miata won't pull up all the components that exist for the mechanically identical 1990 Miata. But it's already shaping up to be a fantastic repository of parts from tons of 3D model makers. Even better, the site has a killer app that nothing else in the space offers, print on demand. This is the kind of thing that 3D printing makes possible and has the potential to be huge. One thing that I want to preface my comments with is that when it comes to cosmetic parts, or ones that aren't related to safety, the type of plastic used probably doesn't matter. And some parts, like the heater cores on VWs in the late 80s, early 90s, those were originally plastic, and you should never replace them with a plastic heater core. Because as many people found out the hard way, the coolant in the car can get hot enough to melt those plastic heater cores, and when it does, the coolant, which is at over the boiling point of water, dumps right on the feet of sometimes the driver, sometimes the passenger, sometimes both, depends on how the mechanics of the car worked. But anyways, if you broke the trim on part of your car and the replacement parts cost hundreds of dollars, the site's worth checking out to see if the necessary files are available, even if you don't have a 3D printer, because the site does have ways for you to pay someone to print the files you need and send the parts to you. Depending upon the part, that might come in significantly cheaper than buying a new part from the dealer or an aftermarket supplier. There is also a huge potential for the site that's not mentioned in the article. One of the YouTube shows I watch is by a guy who buys weird cars. Part of his collection includes electric cars made in the 70s and 80s. Ones you've never heard of. He also has more recent cars, and many of these weren't produced for very long. One of those was involved in a minor accident, and if you could still get parts, would be easily repairable. He's been able to 3D print some of the parts that he needs, but others of them, he admits that it's beyond his ability to design what he needed. His solution is that he's going to customize the car and turn it into a convertible. Now, on a more common car, you'd certainly be able to find the parts to put it back the way it was, but you might not be able to find the parts to help you customize the car the way you want it. And that's another possibility this thing opens up. For example, say you don't like the cup holders in your car. You poke around on the site and discover that someone's made a different design of cup holders that fit your car. You like those better. And they're fairly cheap, so you give it a shot. Or maybe you want certain knobs to be a different shape or color. If the design for them is there, you can have them printed out in whatever color you want. Imagine having the inside door handles that glowed in the dark. That'd be pretty cool and could come in handy in an emergency. You know, you're out in the middle of nowhere, you have a wreck at night, and, you know, while you're disoriented and trying to figure out how to get out of the car, you know, you can see the glowing door handles.
Quiet day. I certainly hope someone needs a forest ranger here sometime.
Hello, I'm Dr. Roger Fleming, and I seem to have lost my way.
I'm Ranger Brad, and that's what I'm here for. You can call me Ranger Brad. Most folks do.
Yes, Ranger Brad. Of course. I like that. Do you think you could tell me the way to Cadaver Cave?
Cadaver Cave? Why do you want to go there?
Ranger Brad, do I tell you all your ranger business?
No, I guess not. Keep going on this trail about a mile. You can't miss it.
Thank you, Ranger Brad. You've been very helpful.
Anytime. Oh, say, you don't believe those old legends about the lost skeleton of Cadaver, do you?
Ranger Brad, I'm a scientist. I don't believe in anything.
Nice fella.
From SciTechDaily.com, scientists found a way to help the brain bounce back from Alzheimer's. For more than 100 years, Alzheimer's disease has been regarded as a condition that cannot be undone. Because of this assumption, most scientific efforts have focused on stopping the disease before it starts or slowing down its progression, rather than attempting to restore lost brain function. Despite decades of research and billions of dollars invested, no drug trial for Alzheimer's has ever been designed with the explicit goal of reversing the disease and restoring normal brain performance. That long-standing belief is now being directly tested by researchers from University Hospitals Case Western Reserve and the Louis Stokes Cleveland VA Medical Center. Their work asked a fundamental question that has been rarely explored. Can brains already damaged by advanced Alzheimer's recover? The study was led by Kalyani Chebe, apologies if I mispronounced that, PhD of the Piper Laboratory, and was published on December 22 in Cell Reports magazine. By analyzing multiple preclinical mouse models alongside brain tissue from people with Alzheimer's, researchers identified a critical biological problem underlying the disease. They found that Alzheimer's is strongly driven by the brain's failure to maintain normal levels of a key cellular energy module called NAD+. Just as important, they showed that keep NAD+ levels in balance can both prevent the disease and, under certain conditions, reverse it. NAD+ naturally declines throughout the body as people age, including in the brain. When this balance is disrupted, cells gradually lose the ability to carry out essential processes needed for the normal function and survival. The team found that this loss of NAD+ is far more pronounced in the brains of people with Alzheimer's. The same severe decline was also observed in mouse models of the disease. Now, this study was done in mice, so that doesn't mean it'll work in humans. The researchers also caution that while there are over-the-counter supplements that can boost NAD+, they don't recommend taking them because too high of a dose raises the risk of cancer, and you can't always be certain of the dosage amounts in supplements. Mind you, if I, or someone I loved, had Alzheimer's, I'd give it a try. After all, it appeared to completely reverse the damage done by the disease in mice, and if you've only got a couple of years left, dying from cancer while having your wits about you strikes me as a better way to go than spending your few remaining years not knowing who anyone around you is.
There's a general kind of, in the media, there's a lot of that kind of stuff that people don't know about numbers. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a dweeb, all right? I apologize. I'm a bit of a nerd about these kind of things. I get really pissed off when people give out about, like, crime going up, when, say, the numbers are definitely going down. And then if you go, but the numbers are going down, they go, but the fear of crime is rising. And you're going, well, so fucking what? You know what I mean? Zombies are at an all-time low level, but the fear of zombies could be incredibly high. It doesn't mean we have to have government policies to deal with the fear of zombies. It's ridiculous, for Christ's sake.
From TexasTribune.org. Texas Democrats fill every state and federal race on 2026 ballot, a first for either party. See, folks, it's not all bad political news. A Democrat is running in every state and federal race on the Texas ballot next year. The first time in modern state history that either party has fielded a full slate of candidates, according to the Texas Democratic Party. The complete field is the result of a recruitment campaign run by a network of the state's top Democratic groups and politicians, including Texas Majority PAC, the Texas Democratic Party, former U.S. Rep. Beto O'Rourke, and former State Senator Wendy Davis. Wendy Davis, as you might recall, was the Texas state senator who led a filibuster in 2013 to try and block a law that would ban all abortions in the state of Texas. Someone who's obviously very, very committed to her beliefs. Together, the groups recruited 104 candidates to fill every congressional, state house, and state senate seat up for election in 2026. The effort also ensured that a Democrat is running in every statewide, judicial, and state board of education race. No Republican gets a free ride in Texas. Texas Democratic Party Chair Kendall Scudder said in an interview, "If you are a Republican and you want to hold public office in the state, you're going to have to fight us for it. This is important, especially in a midterm election. If there's not someone from your party on the ticket, there's little incentive for you to turn out and vote. So Democrats have a better chance of a larger turnout, which means that they can flip some seats. Certainly not all of them, and maybe not enough to make a difference in places like Congress, but that's okay. Every little bit helps. And if those Democrats who do win make an effort to listen to their constituents and address their needs, then there's a better chance that Democrats will be able to gain more seats in the next election. The roots of Trumpism lie with Nixon's Southern strategy that he developed in the 1960s. We're not going to beat it in one election. And we're also not going to beat it without Democrats who have a bold vision for the future. But if we don't push back with everything we have now, we'll never be able to fix it. If a red state like Texas can do this, so can the other red states. They just need people willing to work to make it happen." And I don't know if you've seen it, but on his first day as mayor, Zohran Mamdani was sworn in on January 1st. On his first day, he was going to apartments that tenants had complained their landlord was not fixing things, and inspecting the apartments and finding out information from the tenants. That's New Year's Day. He was doing this while the previous mayor, Eric Adams, was out partying on his first day in office. If he's doing that on his first day, that's a good sign. He's going to be a good mayor. And let's all hope he turns out to be a good mayor, because he can inspire people to do great things elsewhere. And the people who worked for him to help get him elected will be invaluable in helping other people across the country get elected. There's an interview with Curtis Sliwa in the Wall Street Journal. And you know, this was done after the election. And the guy interviewing Sliwa was trying to get Sliwa to trash Mamdani, and Sliwa wouldn't do it. Sliwa said, I don't agree with what all he, with everything he wants to do, but I think he's an honorable and decent man. Sliwa said that in 2019, his ex-wife was running for office in New York, and she was a Democrat. She had all the ties and connections one needs to have an easy time running for office in New York City. Her opponent was this upstart candidate who was very radical, very progressive, who lost by 20 votes. Who was the person who organized the the door knocking campaigns and going out on the streets and meeting potential voters? Mamdani. He had 100,000 volunteers going door to door. It's not clear from the interview which campaign Sliwa is talking about. It's probably Mamdani's mayoral campaign. And Sliwa says, the secret to Mamdani's campaign was that he had people out there in the streets talking to other people. So, and I know he had help from people who worked on some of AOC's campaigns and a few other, and some of the Sanders campaigns. So he's, I mean, if those people helped him get into office, and he, does a halfway decent job, and possibly even if he doesn't, they've got the blueprint for getting good candidates elected. Because Mamdani was the absolute underdog when he went into that race. He didn't have the name recognition that the other candidates had. He didn't have the money that the other candidates had. But he was able to get enough attention, enough notice, that people began donating to his campaign to the point where he had to ask them to stop because New York limits the amount of money a campaign can spend. And he hit that limit with donations, and he's like, don't send me the money. I can't do anything with it. I have to send it back. So that, that is really promising. Another candidate who seems really promising is Kat, and I'm going to butcher her last name, Abba-Gazela, who is running for Congress in Chicago. She has turned her campaign headquarters not only into, the headquarters, but it's a mutual aid station. So people have donated things like baby diapers, menstrual products, food, stuff like that. And, her campaign is allowing people in need to come and get the things that they need, and they're taking the items to people who are in need. And that is so refreshing because she's, using the office or, the campaign to help people before she's even elected. And statistically speaking, she's like, if she's I don't know if they've had the primary yet or not, but if she wins the primary, the district that she's in is, the odds of a Democrat losing that district are pretty small. So she's a shoo-in. But, that's just fantastic. Now, I need to point out that she does have some pretty powerful news media connections that are undoubtedly going to help her in ways that they, they'll help her like Fox News helps Trump. Her boyfriend runs The Onion. Okay, I need to get out of here. Take care of yourselves, and may science guide your path.
That's it for this episode of the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes. It's also on Stitcher, and most of the episodes are on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter at tparkatheist, and it's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist. You can email me at trailerparkatheist@gmail.com. Show notes can be found at tparkatheist.blogspot.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to donate to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can also support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker.
Say goodnight, Fuzz-Nuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.